Salutations, Exile. Been a while. For several leagues now, Wardloop builds have been meta and expensive. I aim to change that. To afford this build, you must first acquire the Mirror of Calandra that a high-end Wardloop build would require, then vendor it to get the currency that this build requires. Over the past year, I've made 3 iterations of the build, and it's been so long that most of the things I used have been changed. So rather than go over my exact build, I'm just going to give a broad overview of the build concept. A traditional Wardloop build uses Olroth's Resolve for permanent ward, so it can face tank an infinite number of Forbidden Rite casts without actually losing any life, and use cast when damage taken to create a spellcast loop. Because the self-damage is completely negated, it can use as many spells as will fit in the sockets, at the highest gem level possible, as fast as possible. This is quite powerful in combination with the Annihilating Light and Crystallized Omniscience, as ward mods are all prefixes, leaving the suffixes open for attribute modifiers. This is by far the best use of cast when damage taken, and there is little advantage to using anything else. So, I set out to create a similar build that is much cheaper, and in some ways, better. We will not be using ward at all. A wardless Wardloop, if you will. Instead, we will face tank all of the damage, and simply recoup over 100% of it, using a combination of at least 60% life recoup, mind over matter, and at least 40% mana recoup. We will also be theoretically harder to one-shot than a traditional Wardloop by having higher maximum life and more damage reduction. One of the only problems with the traditional Wardloop is that it is prone to getting one-shot by physical or chaos damage. The spellcast loop depends on Heartbound Loop, so any armor would ruin it, and there's no room for armor on ward gear anyway. It also relies on Forbidden Rite, and since the build has so little life, it requires negative chaos resistance to function. We solve this problem by using the Doppelganger guy's unique chest. By having a percentage damage reduction instead of armor's flat reduction, we can have a reasonable amount of physical damage reduction against big hits, while allowing the self-damage to still be high enough. With a regular cast when damage taken gem, we can have up to 35% physical damage reduction. With divergent cast when damage taken, we can have 40% on the Doppelganger guys and take the Gruthcall Pantheon for an additional 5%. Unlike armor, this physical damage reduction also works on damage over time. We also get some handy chaos damage reduction, which we offset by simply having more life to increase the self-damage of Forbidden Rite. The more life we have, the more chaos resistance we're allowed to get. The constant 10% life regeneration is nice, but roughly 600 life regeneration per second is nothing compared to the over 13,000 per second from Recoup. So, we're harder to one-shot, but Wardloop can tank an infinite number of hits that are smaller than the ward amount. Having over 100% recoup is nice, but 4 seconds is plenty of time for the enemy to simply hit you again before you've healed. We solved this problem back in Sentinel League by having 5 max-rolled pre-nerf Flagellant Flasks and taking the Pathfinder Scion node, which had the 4% life recovery Flask mastery on it at the time. Essentially, we would recover 20% life whenever an enemy hit. Note that the spellcast loop doesn't count as being hit by an enemy. Speaking of those flasks, that's also where all of our elemental resistances come from. The Annihilating Light makes it difficult to cap resistances, so we use a Bismuth, Ruby, Sapphire, and Topaz flask, one of which has a tier 1 resistances roll, in order to cap our resistances without relying on our gear. Having 100% uptime on these flasks is much easier than Olroth's Resolve. We also use Purity of Elements, because ailment immunity is very nice, and we don't have many other options anyway. While we've spent a disproportionate amount of our budget merely surviving our own damage, the build is actually pretty good at clearing content. 1 to 2 million DPS seems low on paper, but being constant and fully automatic makes it feel much higher. This is the first build I've ever done that is both great to map with and capable of completing most endgame content. Unfortunately, because Recoup takes 4 seconds to ramp up, we kind of have to start the loop like a lawnmower. such a lovely sound. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Let me dance like a bug on the cinema screen. Shake my hand at the world and its pyramid schemes. I'm in love